TikTok is an outreach platform that I would differentiate from maybe a LinkedIn, a Twitter, or an Instagram, which I like to call more nurture oriented. You can build more of a community on those platforms.
Hey, I'm Karina.
And I'm Taylor.
And this is Direct, a podcast we created to showcase the creativity and hard work of go-to-market teams everywhere.
We're here to share the stories and experiences of the hardworking, passionate individuals who make up go-to-market teams, the ones who truly make the magic happen.
Taylor and I have been fortunate enough to work side by side on some incredible projects together, and now we want to put a spotlight on the unsung heroes behind some of the best go-to-market campaigns out there.
In each episode, you'll hear from individual contributors who have gone above and beyond to make a difference. They'll share their challenges, victories, and the lessons they've learned along the way, all to help you unlock the next step in your career. Get ready to be inspired, learn something new, maybe even share a laugh or two.
Welcome to Direct.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Direct. My name is Taylor Young, and I'm here with my incredible co-host, Karina Owens.
Hi, all. Happy to be back.
Happy to be here with the amazing Chris Lazo. Chris is the Senior Manager of Demand Generation at HG Insights, leading the strategy, management, and execution of their primary pipeline activities for high-intent leads. A self-proclaimed sender of way too many Slack message gifts, relatable, and a full-on Bermuda grass nerd, he balances his rapid descent into suburban lawn care by powerlifting, reading, TikTok, hanging out with his family, and his Labradoodle Coco. Hi, Chris. It's great to have you on the show.
Hey, great to be here, Taylor and Karina. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we are incredibly excited to talk to you about all of this TikTok wonder that you have to talk about today. But first, we always ask each one of our guests the magic wand question. If you had a magic wand, like the one I have here today, and you could change anything about your career or your role or something in your life, what would that be?
That's a great question. I think if I had one thing to change, it would be this. I'm very passionate about learning. I love researching, reading, listening to other people's perspectives. But I think that only came like halfway into my life. And you start learning stuff, you put it into practice, you execute on it. I think if I had a magic wand, I would take all of that and go back to when I was 20 because if I knew when I was 20, 18, 25, some of the things I know now, I think that would have been awesome. But yeah, if I had a magic wand, I would condense all of my learning and go back to my youth. That's what I would do.
I would love to do that as well. So super relatable. Okay, Chris. Well, we're going to jump right into this. We'll revisit your magic wand question at the bottom of the hour, but we are here today to talk about your success on TikTok, which is actually where you and I first connected. So funny, we chatted earlier that we feel like we know each other, but we've actually never spoken face to face until now. So, Chris, I would love to just kick it off by saying, what made you want to get into TikTok and how did you first approach it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I first got into TikTok a couple years ago through work, and it was actually a distribution problem. I was on the demand gen team, and like a lot of B2B companies, there was a spread of marketing teams. You had the branding content team, you had demand gen, you had some form of comms. And I remember wanting to create, I love creating content and asking my boss, like, hey, can I do this? She's all, well, that's owned by, blogs, that's owned by the content team. Like, what about YouTube? That's owned by this team. What about social media, organic social? That's owned by comms. And I remember having this moment where I was like, I came in here to create, and the only channels I have to do that is email and paid ads. And then I was just like laughing inside to myself because I remember the marketing ops person at the time telling me like, and you can only send one email a week because we're sending way too many. And I was just floored. I was like, I get one chance a week to send, content that we want to create. And so it started off as a distribution opportunity, I guess. And it was actually before TikTok, it started off with YouTube. That
Okay.
was one of the few spaces that was untapped at this company. I was working at a health tech company at the time, and we created a short form, it was like 2-minute video on YouTube after doing some research and saying, "Okay, what are other people doing in the space?" And I was pleasantly surprised to see that while there was a lot of video in that space, it all seemed to strike the same chord. If you think of healthcare, like a typical video in healthcare,
All
it's
these
like,
ads are running through my head right
yeah,
now.
yeah. It's like if I could boil it down in like 1 second, it's like typical ad is, a mom with daughter, running slow motion through a field of wheat, with strings in the background. And then all of a sudden it goes dark and like this heavy voice narrating is like, do you or your loved ones have, a terminal illness? Call your pharmacist today. And it's just like heavy. Like if
Mhm.
I could if I could pinpoint the emotional tone on the spectrum, it was all just very heavy. And I remember thinking, okay, this is healthcare. It's already emotionally heavy. We're
Mhm.
just coming out of the pandemic. So just lots of emotional heaviness. Not that that's a good emotion to tap into. I just noticed that's all, companies are tapping into. So what else do people need right now? Maybe they need joy. Maybe they need delight. I don't know. Is there a space for that in healthcare? So, or in health tech? And so we experimented, created a 2-minute video. It was a product promotion. It was called Clinical Support Staff Steve. It was basically a skit, and it wasn't even comical. I wouldn't even say it's entertaining, but it was just lighthearted, and it ended up
Mm.
striking a chord, got a lot of engagement, got pipeline out of it, and that was kind of the leading indicator for my team. Like there maybe this is something we should explore. But because of my short term, not short term, my short attention span, I was like, I don't want to create one video every 2 weeks. I want to do this like all the time. And so we started exploring TikTok, asked my team, my boss, hey, what about TikTok? And her response was, no one owns that. So why don't you check it out? And so that started my journey into TikTok, is just to see, all right, I don't know anything about this channel, so I'm just going to start an account. I'll talk about marketing and we'll see if it takes off. And that's kind of how I got into that channel.
I love that story because it's actually what I think about when I look at your video content is that you are creating like a lot of levity. There is humor in it. And it does really work very well with the platform when you're saying you have kind of that short attention span maybe, or the need to like produce and produce and produce. Like that is
Yeah.
very well suited for TikTok's algorithm. What were some of your initial findings when you started to move from YouTube to TikTok? What would you say are the main different things that
Mhm.
people should consider when they're creating video content for either channel?
Oh, that's great. I think at the time, this is changing right now, but at the time, I would have said YouTube was a lot of long form content. It still had to be done really well, produced really well. At the time, TikTok almost felt sloppy. You could record something on your phone, in the passenger seat of a car with your headphones on for 7 seconds, and it would just blow up. And I just really loved that side of it. It was just an open space for creators. Right now, you can see that TikTok is wanting more of that long form content. And so I'd say the difference today is it's not, when I say long form, I mean like 2 minutes, not maybe a 10 or 30-minute or 1 hour piece on YouTube. But I think it's gravitating towards that. And with those time parameters, 2 minutes is still pretty short. I think it's forcing creators to really tighten up their narrative and be able to tell a story. I know for me, if I'm given 60 minutes or 30 minutes, I can ramble. I'm kind of probably doing that right now. But when you tell me like, hey, you have 30 seconds to say something that's compelling, it does something to me. It kind of forces me to take out anything that isn't there, and I think that's really good for creators. I think it's good for me as a creator, I should say.
And speaking of like content, right? And making sure that it's going to resonate with your target audience. Did you find that you had a lot of initial success because your audience was not so saturated with a lot of thought leaders or personas on TikTok yet. Did that
Hmm.
help you at all to stand out a little bit more, to use a channel that wasn't so populated yet by a lot of other creators in that
Yeah.
space?
Oh, that's so interesting that you say that because I have two TikTok channels. The first one, I was just trying to run an experiment for my company. So I was like, well, I'm not a healthcare expert, I'm a marketer. So I'll just talk about, B2B marketing or whatever, content marketing, and quickly realized one, it's hard. It was challenging for me to talk about content marketing, to make videos about content marketing. It's like this weird circular thing. But
Sure.
in that space, there were some big names. There's a lot of people doing that. And when I switched over to other channels where I wasn't just making content about how to make content, but I picked maybe a smaller segment, I noticed there was a little more space for me to play in. But I'd agree with you, Karina. I think TikTok is not quite as mature as YouTube. And so there's just a lot of space for me to play and to get traction with, that target audience that I was looking for.
Absolutely. And I know we're going to get into a little bit of a story here where you are reaching out to a much broader audience and you had a nice, cool test of that. But I know I've seen you talk about a little bit niching down and that like you can go viral, but when you are very specific and where you're getting into this B2B space
Hmm.
is where you wanted to play. So, what do you have to say to people who are thinking that TikTok is not a place for B2B?
I run into that all the time. And I remember just having to show executives and directors like the data. And
Hmm.
at the time, that was the big question with health tech is the personas that we would reach out to were, directors of patient engagement, maybe a CTO, C-suite. And that'd be the big question. Like they're not on TikTok, they're on LinkedIn if they even have time, right? And that was part of my journey at the beginning was I wonder if they are. I am. I'm on TikTok. And I found, hashtags like health tech or healthcare IT, healthcare administration, healthcare executives. These hashtags were getting tens of thousands of hits, meaning that people were creating content. I found personas, I found influencers that were in that space, and I took it back to my boss and I was like, "They are on here. They're just not they're just not there in the same way that they might be if they were on LinkedIn." I think maybe people they probably come onto LinkedIn. I know I do with kind of a work lens. I'm looking for tips on work. I'm looking to connect with the right people. I might be pushing out a resume, so on and so forth. People are on TikTok to laugh. It's almost like they turn their work side off to get something else, either to consume or to get entertainment or to learn something helpful. It might even be related to work, but it's like a different side of themselves is activated on that platform. And I was like, this is awesome. How can I show up in that space for them in a way that is meaningful to them on their terms? And so to the B2B professional that says my my prospects aren't on here, I would say you might be right. But there's well over a billion people on TikTok. The chances are they are.
Hmm.
And just find out what they're doing. Maybe it's worthwhile, maybe it's not. But it's a huge space that I think a lot of people are sleeping on, and just to research it.
I think you're calling out something that's really topical right now, which is because everything is so saturated, inundated with AI and automation, and people are just craving that human to human aspect. And I think what you're describing is TikTok may not be the, final conversion point for your buyer's journey, but it's certainly good to warm them up to get to know
Hmm.
Chris as a person and humanize the brand that Chris is representing. So I'm curious, has there been any metrics that you've been able to show back to your brand about how they should view TikTok as more of a brand awareness, a brand affinity channel? What has really stood out to them as far as metrics go to believe in TikTok as a channel?
Sure. I think the first one people seem to be interested, from my experience, is will it get my thing, my brand, my company or product or service or message in front of the people that I want. That's usually the first one. And my answer to that is absolutely. TikTok is an outreach platform that I would differentiate from maybe a LinkedIn, a Twitter, or an Instagram, which I like to call more nurture oriented. You can build more of a community on those platforms. TikTok is like Pinterest, it's a search engine optimization platform like YouTube or Google. And uh, the algorithm is designed to get you in front of new people, not to keep you in front of the ones that you're connected with. I don't know if you've ever experienced this on TikTok, but once I follow you, like I never see people's content again. Like it's a very outreach oriented platform, but that's the beauty of it is it gets you in front of new eyes so
Mhm.
that you can start to cultivate that relationship either there or somewhere else like this. You brought this up, Karina. I met you on TikTok and now I'm talking to you in real life, this is awesome. Um,
Yes.
but that would be the first metric. The second metric, at least in the B2B space, is always seems to come down to is it gonna get me leads and is it gonna get me pipeline?
Mhm.
And my my caution there for for that is yes, but not like tomorrow.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
it's like a relationship. It's going to take some time, and before you start tracking those metrics, you need some lead indicators of future success that you can rely on. Otherwise, you're going to start this and a month later your boss is going to be like, "No MQLs, let's shut it down." Let's start
Mhm.
gating stuff. I don't know. And so those would be the two things. I would say absolutely, and we've seen all of those metrics come in. My little TikTok channel, my second one that I started, gets more unique visitors than most enterprise tech companies' websites get in a month. I get in a week, the unique visitors. And
Wow.
that's not like my wonderful content. It's the platform, it's like
Yeah.
designed to push you in front of people. Like it's incredible. I'm like, why why aren't people capitalizing on this? And I know the reason. It's hard to track some of the metrics that people want initially, but those would be the things that I would share.
Yeah. Speaking of, you hinted toward that second account, and I know that it was also in our bio, your descent into Bermuda grass lawn care. And I know you used that second profile as kind of a proof of concept of how you can go viral on a platform like this and get tons of eyeballs on your content. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd love to. It kind of started with that initial account on TikTok, which came out of an experiment. And so I just picked marketing, B2B marketing, and then I went down the road of niching down so far that I got in trouble. I went from B2B marketing to content marketing to TikTok videos and found myself making TikTok videos about how to make TikTok videos. And I hit this point where I was like, I need to reset. Like, I need to find my voice again and what I love creating. And I need a message, a product, or an activity to focus on besides this circular thing of like how to make TikTok videos. And at the time, I live in North Carolina and grass is huge out here. We have HOAs too. So they're like, mow your grass. And so I found myself just developing a hobby overnight where I was like, I got to take care of my garden, take care of this grass. And it was really fun. And I started learning a lot about it and talking to people. And there's this huge underground scene in the South of people that love their lawns, and it's super nerdy and totally for me. And one day I was just like, I wonder if there's an audience for this on TikTok. I wonder if there's a market for this. And I wonder if I can carve out some of that market. And did the same thing I did before, found that there were millions of posts on grass. There were some influencers, but most of the videos kind of struck one single chord. it was tips like, "Hey, you got brown spots in your lawn? Well, do this." And then, pan out to a video of them doing that. And I'm like, I could totally find a space in this. And I created an account, put a content calendar together, and set a goal for myself to see how quickly I could create a viral video starting fresh. After all of those experiments with the first account, now I had a fresh account. And so I wanted to put together all of that collective knowledge from the last year and try to get a video off the ground as quickly as possible. I thought maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month. And about 8 days in, after starting that account, one of my videos blew up, and it was the geekiest video. I mean, I'm talking about like lawn fungus and watering schedules, and that blew my mind too. I'm like, it almost doesn't matter how weird the topic is. Like if you can find a way to resonate with people and tell a story, TikTok will reward you. So that was it. And to answer your question, Taylor, what I took into that experiment were about three things. I like to call it the three Ps, and it's not novel. It's basically just marketing, but applied to TikTok. It started with the people. It was asking that question: is there a market for this? Are there enough people that care about this? And can I carve out enough of it? Can I make enough of a splash to carve out some of that market for myself? The second thing was the platform itself, TikTok. What is successful on this platform? So a part of a lot of that first week was just consuming, which is, I think, the most fun part of starting a TikTok account is just going through your For You page, because TikTok doesn't know who you are yet. They don't know what you're creating. They don't know what you like. And so they immediately start pushing all the best content in the world into your For You page. It is awesome. And now they actually have a button that you could refresh to get fresh content. But I just started doing that. What's working on here? What strikes a nerve? And can I apply that to grass? I don't know. Let's try it. And then after, from that week, that year of experimenting with content marketing, you just start to learn, here's what works on TikTok. You need a good hook. It needs to be kind of fast paced. You need to have some storytelling involved. You need to be able to keep people's attention. You can't really waste space. You need some basic SEO. And then for the viral component, I needed to kind of break out of my niching down. I needed to say, okay, I'm talking about lawn here. That is weird. How can I tell a story that's going to appeal to as many people as possible before I then narrow down my scope? And so I just started running that playbook over and over and over. The third component is presentation, where I take the people part. Okay, I found a market, lawn, that's a huge thing. I think I can carve out a space there. Here's what works on TikTok. Here's some of the formulas that work on this platform. And then lastly, presentation. How can I be myself on this platform in a way that fits, where I can be truly me, which is, I like teaching. I'm probably a little bit playful. I want the permission to be goofy if I have to, and to lose a
Mhm.
sense of that professionalism and act like to feel like I'm interacting with friends on this platform. And I found that in this particular platform. So I just kept running those three things, practicing different formats and just being persistent. Didn't happen the first time, didn't happen the second time. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I knew it worked. And then 8 days later, one of those videos took off, and it's been doing that ever since.
I love this 8-day framework, process template here. I think that's going to be super impactful for our audience. Having gone post viral after that, what has this done for you as far as like your personal brand? Like, you've talked a lot about how you felt like you could start to come out of your shell a bit, be a little bit more authentic to who you are as a person, break out of that B2B mold that maybe has been created for a lot of us.
Mhm.
What has this done for you from a personal brand perspective, or how has this
Okay.
opened up new doors for you?
Well, on the lawn front, I get a lot of free stuff sent to me, so I
You
don't need to.
do. Oh, that's
It's
awesome.
just from some big companies, which is fun. I don't need to pay for this very expensive hobby. But
And is
But
this
that's
off of the video that went viral, or did you continue to do are they doing it from other videos that you've done around the
other ones. So that
Okay.
started the growth, but just kept doing that same playbook over and over. And you have this one thing that a company wants. You have reach and outreach. So it's like that affiliate stuff. They share their stuff with you in hopes of you sharing your audience with them. So that's been nice. I wouldn't say lawn is my career, my future career. I love marketing. But in the B2B space, I think TikTok has really shaped how I think about, I guess you could call it top of funnel video marketing and what appeals to people. And I know I've heard both of you talk about some of this before, a lot in that ABM space, but there's such an evolution happening and that has been happening in the way that buyers buy. And the playbooks that I used to run before aren't working anymore. And what seems to be working, not to make it all about video, but that seems to be a really big piece. And the way that it is crafted and shared, not
Mm.
the the stories that are told, the way that it engages an audience, it just seems to be different than the old way of running some of those same platforms and channels. And so that's what I've taken back into my work and my marketing profession.
It sounds like so much of what your 3P process I love, but a lot of that also, that third one, presentation and really personality. You're bringing a lot of yourself into these platforms. And so what you were just talking about makes me think a lot about the AI tools that are coming into the
Mm,
content creation space. So I'd love to hear your perspective because a lot of your your algorithm is based on being really
mm.
human and connecting with other humans. So what's your perspective on AI in the content creation?
AI, you probably can relate to this. I feel like the past 2 years, there's been one message, especially to marketers about AI. You need to get on board. You need to do this. Nobody knows what they're doing, but you need to do this now. You don't want to miss this train.
Mhm.
And a lot of this, probably the very recently, the last 6 months for me and my journey with AI has been trying to identify the limitations of it and the capacity and to figure out, okay, we all know AI is here to stay and it is a powerful tool. Um, but I was one of those marketers that got caught up in chat GPT trying to, see if it could write an email for me and it didn't work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to discern, I think, like what's AI's role in what I do? What
Mhm.
what are its limitations, but what are also its capacities? And just trying to look for some guardrails to think through that. I think where I am at personally is that AI and a lot of different machine learning formats seem to they're not great at certain types of creativity. I would never tell it to create a marketing strategy for me. I would be very careful about ways of, trying to ask it to write things creatively for me. However, I've really been interested in figuring out ways that it can scale my efforts and help me save time. So I think that's where I'm at. I'm like, okay, it's limited in some ways. I'm still trying to figure out what that is, but it is an awesome tool. I just want to learn, just have some kind of wisdom in how I bring it into my company, my personal life,
Mhm.
my professional career. I don't know if that answers your question too.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that sometimes the secret sauce is just the humanity behind it. And so I was really
Hmm.
curious about your perspective and I appreciate you
Oh,
sharing it. I know that was kind of off the off the topic.
oh, that's great. That's one of the things that annoyed me so much is I remember the first thing I did with ChatGPT was just have it write something for me, and that was a huge mistake,
Mhm.
because it took the bajillion people in the world that it was sourcing all of that stuff from, and it ended up sounding like
White bread.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you noticed I was talking to Nick Bennett about this, and he was teaching me about Chat GPT generated LinkedIn comments. Do you run into this at all?
Oh God.
Where marketers are using Chat GPT to write comments to engage with you. And I was like, "How do you
Right.
know they're generated by Chat GPT?" And he's like, "Look at them all. They're
They all
they're
sound the
all
same.
yeah, and they all basically just summarize what I've said, which is what it's really
Mhm.
good at. It summarizes stuff." I was like, "That's very interesting."
Yeah, I mean, I know there's lots of tools too right now that are trying to actually emulate the persona by making it a template, like making it a prompt template, insert opinion here, insert personality here, spit out X. But it to your point, it all just ends up sounding exactly the same. There's no original thought really.
Mhm.
And even just
Yeah.
word choices, word choices and sentence structures. It just really comes, through as obviously AI generated. So it's really, I think video content is going to reign supreme still. I'm wondering, you've obviously got expertise on YouTube, you've got expertise on TikTok. For anybody in the B2B space that's looking to still do most of their content on LinkedIn, what would be like some of your tips for how they should think about creating engaging, meaningful video content on that
Mm,
platform?
yeah. Well, this is coming from my perspective as probably not a LinkedIn expert, so just my 2 cents. Video does seem, from my standpoint, does seem to be striking a chord on LinkedIn along with some of the other long form copy and messaging as well. I think figuring out how to do the same thing that works on TikTok, but in a way that fits LinkedIn's platform. Just like we were talking about earlier, when I moved to TikTok, I had to figure out what works on this platform. It's different than Instagram Reels. It's different than Facebook. And LinkedIn is probably the same way. There's certain things that work there. So I would start by looking at videos that are very engaging and thought leaders, not just in your industry, but outside of your industry. This is one of the best things I did on TikTok was not watch other marketers, but watching the teenager doing memes, the cardiologist who, struck a chord with his patients, the lawn dads, the do it yourself home makeover person, people that are able to be creative in that platform with a wide variety of things. I would do that with LinkedIn as well. And I'd say that some things, will outlive TikTok and LinkedIn and all of that stuff. Storytelling, that's going to be around for a long time. It just taps into who we are as human beings and into our emotion and into our experiences and into the way that we process information. We're storytelling people. So I'd say some things, even if you don't want to start a TikTok account, just grabbing some of the things that work there, like
Mhm.
hooks and storytelling and how to move your target audience from point A to point B, and how to tap into their emotion and how to make them feel and how to connect with them as a person over something that you share, even if it's a product. And I think being able to grab those things and say, okay, how does that translate into LinkedIn in a way that does honor to who I am on that platform? I'm not a weirdo like Chris Lazo and I don't want to be on TikTok, but I'm me on LinkedIn. What does that look like? And how can I tell a story in a way that reflects that?
I love how much of this really comes back to storytelling, understanding the audience, helping the audience. I was actually just at my alma mater, my college, talking to students where with my old professor, and they had so many questions for me about TikTok. And I'm like, I feel ancient in this moment, and I am not 30 yet. Like, what is happening? So they will be so excited to hear this episode for that specific audience, the younger marketers coming in. Do you have another hot take or a hot tip for the TikTok algorithm or anything to share with that group that I know will be listening to this before we close?
I don't know if this applies to everyone in the same way, but for me, I just needed to learn how to have fun again with marketing, and TikTok did that. I'm not like trying to put TikTok on a pedestal. It was really just
A challenge.
like a challenge and a moment of self-awareness, where I had drifted from the things that I loved about marketing. And for whatever it was worth, TikTok like brought me back to some of those things. I want to laugh. I want to make great content again. I want to tell good stories. I want to talk to people and interact with them in comments, and meet them in real life. And that's what did it to me for me. And I'd say if there's anyone else that resonates with that, I just start an account and not post anything, just scroll for a week and allow yourself to get pulled back into some of those things about content creation that you fell in love with at the beginning and go from there.
You really clearly, like, and I think all your responses have really showed how much of a lifelong learner you are. And I love this idea of teaching too. I'm a former educator, so that really speaks to my heart too about wanting to continuously share with others, impart my learnings. So, bringing it back to our magic wand before we let you go, we did ask you if there was anything you could change about your life, your work, your job. What would you change? And you share with us that you would love to go back in time and take all this knowledge that you have and give it to your younger self, your younger Chris. And nay, a time machine, right? I had to think thoughts of I thought of some ideas of ways that we could solve this for you. But before I give you my thoughts, I'm curious, have you had any thoughts or reflections about how you would answer that, or do you want me to go first?
Ooh, I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear Karina's take
Okay.
first.
So I think, given your expertise and where you're finding a lot of passion and joy and laughter, I think it'd be really cool if you created a video series on TikTok where Chris goes back in time and takes younger Chris's campaigns, content, etc., and schools him and says exactly, what he got wrong, what young Chris was missing, and what Chris would do today. And then I think you could even take that further and actually get submissions from people to be like, hey, Chris, I want you to do this with younger Karina. What did she get wrong here? And what would Chris today advise young Karina to do? What are your thoughts?
I love that. I'm actually writing them, taking some notes right now because that's a great idea.
I could
Um,
totally see your talking head do that too, right? Like coming in with a little microphone and having the background be like this, I don't know, god awful email template that Chris sent out when he was younger. Yeah, I feel like it would fit into your personality so well.
yeah, that's a great idea. I think I might have to do that.
Awesome. Well, I definitely can't wait to see that. And I really love all the frameworks, the 3 Ps, the just intentionality behind your storytelling and just being a lifelong learner. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the pod today. I know our listeners are going to thoroughly enjoy this episode. Thank you.
Hey, thanks Karina and Taylor for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and just loved getting to talk to you both.
Likewise. All right, we'll see you around.
All right,
Thanks.
bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Direct with Karina and Taylor.
If you enjoyed what you heard in today's episode, please give us a follow, maybe even a 5-star review, wherever you listen to your podcast.
And if you know someone that you'd like to spotlight, or if you want to share your own story, visit us at motionagency.io/direct. We'd love to hear from you.